I'm going to press start recording, which means that we are in some form recording a thing. Oh, right, this is exciting. Good evening, everyone. It's 2022. Is it? Wait a minute, let me check. It's now. It's the 5th. It's the 29th. No, it's not yet. No, it is. It is. It's the 5th. It's the 5th of January. Except it isn't, obviously. It's actually the 21st of December, 2021. But we're in the 2022 year. Crikey. There we go. We're time travel, David.
Happy New Year. It's not.
That's the one, yeah. Happy New Year.
I'm confused.
yeah. It's going out on the 5th of January.
Is there a dodgy Stargate somewhere?
Yeah, well, exactly, yeah. I hope you've all had a nice Christmas and Hogmanay, everyone. Welcome to the new year. We're probably all in lockdown, so I hope everyone's enjoying their lack of travelling abilities. Yes, we're talking about, but forget all of that, because we're talking about, this is in the third of our Christmas specials and the second pre-record, we have Dr. David Turner joining us. Hello, David.
How is everybody? Oh no, you can't respond.
Oh, they can't respond. Well, they can in the chat. How are you all in the chat? I might well be in the chat saying hi at this point. So,
throw me a tweet at some point.
Yeah, exactly. Tweet me and David. Tell us how you're doing. We're going to talk about Xmas holidays by rail, Edwardian-style, and it's going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to.
And we're going a bit back further, aren't we?
We are actually. It's true. I've said Edwardian-style, but actually, we're going to be exploring quite a bit earlier than that. This is sort of, but a lot of your research is looking at that period, sort of up to 1914, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole book to be written about sort of Christmas travel and mobility. Hello, everybody.
Hello. Yeah, so I thought I'd put your face up very briefly before we crank in. Yeah, there's as you said, there's a whole. There's a sort of, as ever with our episodes. Well, welcome back, by the way. You're our long-term friend of the show. I think you still have racked up the most appearances.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, well,
British quail.
British quail. Oh, the ever popular British quail. So, as ever with these things, they represent a little microcosm that allows a little exploration of a wider history. And I actually found. I'll talk to you afterwards about a quote I found in a book. Thanks to Trash Future Podcast. Hello to Trash Future Podcast. Talking about there's a wonderful quote about how history is actually riding out onto the waters of the deep waters of knowledge and just dropping a little bucket down and bringing back a little tidbit and using that to explore. Oh, it's just I'll read it out at some point. It's glorious. It sums up history in the way that you and I both like and anyway, I'm waffling. So, before I disappear into the depths of a waffle, let's go back to No Face and to be honest, So this is coming off the back. Here's this nice little poster.
So I'm going to give everybody a bit of a warning here. This is a collection of, what we're talking about today is sort of a collection of bits. I'm interested. I love Christmas, and I've collected things, and I sent over a random collection of stuff to Gareth, including a bit of a paper I presented recently. So don't expect some coherence, but it's just a bit of fun, and we're just going through some Christmas railway stuff. So yeah.
Which is absolute perfection. We have. Oh, actually, well, I'm going to go back to our faces again because I have. Not only do I have a nice cup of tea here, lovely cup of tea. Also the Rail Natter merchandise as well. Just as
I've got a Northeastern Railway hotels mug.
Oh, nice. Oh, actually, on that theme, I have. Oh, can I reach this without destroying my entire setup? Probably not. Oh. I have from my talk that I gave at the Model Railway Club. I have one of their GNR mugs, which I'm very pleased about.
Oh right, okay.
I know, it's quite nice, isn't it?
Get me one of those.
They found like the remains of a shattered one of these somewhere underneath one of their models, and they're like, all right, well, I suppose we probably have to reproduce that and do a limited run. So thanks for this one, GNR. Very very kind of them. Anyway, it's sat next to a bunch of permanent way biscuits, which is relevant because I also have a load of actual biscuits here. Actual biscuits and 2 mince pies. So we're all set for Christmas. We've got the Christmas spirit is happening. Oh, anyway, right, David. Yes, we are going to press on.
Yeah.
We've slipped horribly already. What am I like? So yes, Xmas holidays. Look at this, GNR Xmas holidays. I'm already winding up all the language purists, which is.
I will talk about this in a bit in a moment.
Oh yeah.
But I think language purist is an interesting one because you get that sort of old refrain. The language is going downhill. It's just like, well, they've been using Xmas since the late 19th century.
Yeah.
It's a shorthand.
Yeah. It's a commonly used advertising shorthand, and shorthand in lots of other ways. Anyway,
It's more common if you. I think I looked up on the Google Ngram viewer.
Oh yeah.
It becomes more common in the late 19th century, then declines, and then comes back up in the late 20th century.
That's very interesting, actually. Right, so without further ado, let us just start the show. Welcome to tonight's Rail Natter, everyone. Let's do it. City 225 fades away into the snowy night. Oh, there we go. We're going to go back and we're going to bring up these two. Well, in fact, tell you what. Let's get David's miniature face back in the corner. David, tell us about these two. Tell us about these. This is, as you say, this is just basically a load of stuff. We're spreading out a load of stuff on the table, and we're going to talk about it and drink tea and have a mince pie.
So these are actually in the National Archives. There are a couple of posters that I photographed years ago. And remind me the dates on them. So we've got...
So Friday the 24th, Monday the 27th, and that's of... that one's 1852.
Yeah.
And the next one's 1853.
Yeah.
So
I think... we will talk about the development. There is the development... Because the story of Christmas trains is very much linked to the development of the modern Christmas, which I'm gonna foreground a book here that I've used quite a bit. It's Neil Armstrong.
I'll go big face.
Christmas in the 19th Century.
Oh, lovely! Yeah.
If anybody wants to read it, it's a great book. It's a great academic book.
Multi-talented Neil Armstrong, managing to moonbound and author of Christmas.
He's left a really good understanding and account of the development of many dimensions of 19th century Christmas. There are other books out there, but I really like his work. And it's that interesting thing is just like, where did the modern Christmas come from? Where did it develop? And of course, Dickens is always the touchstone. Christmas Carol in the early 1840s. But I think, he built on a lot of existing traditions, and Dickens's book wouldn't have had resonance if it didn't actually fit into an existing understanding of what Christmas was. But it's really interesting, these two posters, because this is the period where Christmas trains or changes at Christmas start to make a difference, or they start to make a sort of, they start to change. Because if you go back to the earliest railways, they're not doing anything special on Christmas. They're not really.
No, really, they just
running
don't even acknowledge it.
Christmas trains. It's not a common occurrence, because Christmas wasn't the same sort of holiday we would imagine it today. It wasn't as. Well, the feeling I get is there's not not much changes. I mean, Christmas is celebrated. You can overdo how much it was sort of invented, but I think there's lots of this is the first period where Christmas is becoming this major thing, and they start putting on day tickets for Christmas, and very quickly in the 1850s they start putting on, they start almost taking off trains. They say, you see it on the left, the trains will be run as on a Sunday. So service. So I'm not really dug into the depths of why they adopted a Sunday service when the demand, or where the demand sits in relation to that. But it's quite clear that you go from this situation where you have, in the 1840s, early 1840s, no distinguishable change in the train service, and by the 1850s you've got more Sunday services coming through, and into the by the end it's more almost end of the century it's Sunday services, and that is actually kind of, if you think about it, the start of the long decline to no Christmas.
Yeah, to us just giving up on the idea of
giving up on Christmas Day.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah.
I think it happened in either between the sort of 60s and the 80s. We lost some, train services on Christmas Day, or the last ones went. Yeah.
So there you go. So oh, do give me a nudge when you want me to next.
Yeah,
slides.
next one.
Yeah, cool. So,
Seasonal,
so it's seasonal travel. Yeah, some nice lounge music here for everyone. Seasonal travel. So, just put that up because it was just expanding on those. It was just expanding on that.
Yeah.
Thing, I think, wasn't it?
So, I mean, generally, what you get is. So I went, 1840. This is North Midland alteration of trains. You get no mention there of Christmas. It's a Christmas period timetable. There's just not really any mention. But if you look on the one on the right, Great Eastern Railway, they say in addition to the ordinary Sunday trains, special trains, first, second, they put on special trains to supplement the service. So even though they are reducing the amount of trains in some ways, they are also supplemented them with specials, which presumably means that they're meeting somebody's demand. Or this Sunday service won't satisfy that amount of customers, so they're adding services.
Yeah. So interesting. So these are interesting anyway, because you've got this sort of fascinating sort of advertising sort of. They're putting in the sort of imagery of the train and the wagons and everything here in 1840, which also it's a very early railway. But then it's quite interesting. They're still doing that in doing it in 1877.
They do it less and less. I do like these little, and also that's the 1870s. But those carriages and that locomotive is really quite dated at that point.
Yeah, I was going to say these wagons here look almost identical to these, so it's almost as if are they using the same plate?
Yeah, I mean, it's that interesting thing where you I sometimes post these things on my social media, and you get people trying to work out what train or what carriage. Don't bother. It's a generic image they shoved in, and probably the newspaper put it in, not the railway company. Possibly.
What on earth was I watching recently where we could see they were showing images of how hopelessly early railways were represented in drawings and sketches, like people were just making it up as they went along. So it's best not to get too.
I did see something I can't recall.
Yeah.
Was it something Anthony Dawson did?
It might well have been, yeah. Anyway, yes. So anyway, we've got lost already because it's interesting stuff. But yeah, it's I mean, these are just always quite interesting. It's interesting to dip into these for all sorts of reasons because they're such a microcosm. As you say, it's interesting that everyone, look, David's a very good historian. The fact that you're spotting that, the fact that it's saying in addition to Sunday trains, which the implication there is that at least for a year, possibly more, Sunday services have been a thing on this, on the Great Eastern at this point. It's clearly acknowledged or expected to be acknowledged by passengers that they'd have the ordinary Sunday trains on a Christmas day.
I mean, the thing also that is it's worth noting is that Christmas services decline in number over the period of the 19th century. In part, in the early period, that's due to Sabbatarianism. Susan Major's researchers, by Susan Major's book, A Million Go Forth on Excursion Trains, she talks about this, how Sabbatarianism, people who wanted to keep the Sabbath sacrosanct, pressured or influenced the development of excursion trains. But Sunday trains declined and some lines were shut down on a Sunday. Now Gareth, is the graph the next one?
It is going to be the next one, yes.
So,
I think so. Or, in fact, no, there's not. There's a picture. We've got the picture.
Okay, well, let's go to the picture.
Yeah, let's have a look at these lovely pictures. Oh, they're nice.
This is the excursion train 1859 on Christmas. So I think there are actually two different. So the two on the right are, a different set of images from the air. They come from different sources, but they're both the excursion train 1859. I might be wrong though. So clearly the one on the left is a London North Western, and you've got to feel sorry. And the hidden, so we're going to be talking mainly about mobility and transport for the, should we say, wealthier sections of society. But the people who don't get discussed so much in this picture are, of course, the staff, the employees who ran the service. And of course, they're not having a great time on that train, clearly.
It's a serious battle being fought, and it's true. Station staff as well, and all the staff, all the plate layers, and everyone keeping the line open, particularly if the weather's inclement.
I mean,
yeah.
staff did get, they especially towards later. I'm aware that they got rostered specially.
Oh, okay.
They might work in the morning. Sam Fay, who went on to be general manager of the Great Central Railway, I'm very lucky to get from Bill Fay, his grandson, a transcription of his diary when he worked at Kingston upon Thames in southwest London, or what is now southwest London, in the late 19th century. And he talks about on Christmas Day how it was, or the period was very busy up to Christmas Day, and then on Christmas Day he had a half day. So, he was a clerk at that point. So, he got time off. I suppose what I like about these images is the top right one. If you look on the far left, the interaction between the guard and the guy on the right. I don't know what's going on there, but I just love the face because there's a sort of challenge there.
Yeah, his eyes are popping. He looks like he's being asked to get off the train there,
Yeah, exactly.
I like that a lot. The other thing I like down here is in this image, the person, the artist who's engraved these appears to not actually know how to draw children, because they appear to have just drawn a smaller adult in place of a child. Here. By the dimensions, I quite like that.
But I mean, I again, these are things I just throw in. I'm not really sure of the source, but they are about travel. They're about going home. They're about journeying for Christmas. Whether that be the staff who convey those journeys, the staff who support and guide those journeys, or people actually traveling. I don't know what. I would have to look into the context, but clearly there was a sense of people travelling for Christmas by the 1850s. This wouldn't be the Christmas excursion train. The interesting thing is, when we come to it later, we talk about the Edwardian period, general managers tended not to think that there were many excursion trains at Christmas. So whether this is an affectation or the Christmas excursion train, or whether it was something else, I can't say.
We could, these images in and of themselves are a microcosm. There's so much to pull out of them, but I like that there are clearly established, not perhaps stereotypes is the wrong word. There are clearly established tropes of the railway traveller. Even by this point, you've got the sort of behatted, slightly shrouded woman quietly in the corner looking out the window. You've got another, reading women seems to be a common trope here. You've got a young, rather sideburned man handing a woman a book, another woman reading in another image. You've got the tall hatted, the stovepipe hatted elderly gentleman. These tropes seem to be quite common as capturing the travelling public.
They are images of relationships and how people were perceived or expected to behave in the period, and. If we think about the staff on the left, it's the stalwart staff. It's they're going to see you through, and later on that sort of applies to, should we say, other trades around Christmas. The postman, they were all postmen, who would take would bear the load. For at Christmas time. The railway porter is another one. There are interesting things goes on, as you say.
And it's interesting. I will flick on to the next image very shortly, but it's actually interesting of the echoes of later sort of iconic artistry, where you have almost these superhuman looking kind of characters, almost transferred into sort of socialist art. Where you have there are echoes of that. The workers there on that train are being kind of made heroes.
I'm sure I've got a couple of friends who are Russianists who are going to question me, but there's a very, should we say, Soviet that sort of the stalwart worker who was doing their job, doing serving other people, etc., etc. But as I say,
and there's a whole episode in exploring that sort of relationship between the capitalist intention of showing workers as heroes to make out that their pay is fine, versus the idea of that iconography being used in the place of making the worker anyway. That's for another day.
But I think there's an interesting story. Christmas is being this time. The Victorians very much imagined of family, home, of hearth, celebration of childhood, and that develops over the 19th century. But that sort of moralizing ideal that you had, that people should be in the bosom of the family. There were separate spheres. The wife would be in the home, the man would be out to work, and how there's a conversation there to be had about, well, how does the railway workers, the postal workers who are actually doing this job, how are they depicted in relation to those sort of norms and ideals within the, they can't be at home with the family having Christmas. So yeah. I don't have an answer for you, but it's an interesting conversation.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. So we're going to talk a little bit about, I need to do a better jazz voice with the with these nice. Little. You can't hear it, but there's just some very nice lounge jazz playing. The Christmas peak. We're going to talk about the Christmas peak because you sent us some data and it's brilliant.
I put these together this week, so don't think I've got great thoughts on them. But it's really useful that because there was interest from potential shareholders, there was interest from analysts. A lot of the railway companies, or a lot of the newspapers, republished data that was in railway magazines. So you can actually extract some of this data from the digital newspapers. I wanted to see that the year that Christmas Carol was released, can we get a sense that there is an increase or decrease of traffic over the Christmas period? Now, I said that there's not much indication that the railways run extra services. So this is really interesting because this is the passenger one. This is passenger traffic late November into January over the Christmas peak. Now, it peaks at the weekend in 23rd. The interesting thing, and this is something that I found later on in the Edwardian period, which I'm studying much more in a dedicated way. Christmas this year, I think, was either on a Sunday or a Monday, which means people are travelling before and probably travelling around that weekend. So actually, the fact that it's weekend in 23rd is interesting because it might suggest these increases in revenue that you see for the North Midland, York and North Midland, Great North of England, and to a lesser extent, the Newcastle and Hull and Selby, might be people travelling home, or greater numbers travelling home for Christmas. Not significant. With most of those uplifts are 20%, 30%. They're not huge, massive, dramatic, but there is an uplift we can see.
The North Midland is quite dramatic, but I suppose to know how significant it is, we'd need to see the whole year, because it might have been there's some reason for it being a bit lower or something like that. Absolutely.
As I said, I extrapolated these figures very quickly, and it takes quite time to even do this amount. So I just wanted to kind of get a sense, but I would suggest it shows that people, what's happening on the Edinburgh-Glasgow is also interesting, because it seems to go up in the new year.
And Scotland does traditionally have a bit more focus on New Year, on Hogmanay, exactly. So that is interesting, yeah.
Yes, and I have found adverts, of course, if you're in Spain, they celebrate Reyes, which is 5th, I think it's 5th of January, and children get their presents in the new year. And what I have found is adverts for excursions on Old Christmas, because people did in Britain celebrate Christmas festivities around 12th night. So there's clearly some. Maybe we'll find that if you went back further. I couldn't say that. That there's not enough. In the 1830s, there's not enough railways probably to show any markable trend. But by the early 1840s, there might be. So.
It's good. And then the next one you've got, so the next data set is the same period, goods traffic. Now I'm going to draw everyone's attention to the y-axis, just to note that it is quite substantially lower revenue numbers. But it's interesting to look at the dates.
Well, firstly, the lower revenue numbers is because the railways made most of their profits from passenger in the early years. Most of them were promoted on the basis of goods traffic and goods movement, but actually it takes until the 1850s, around the mid-1850s, for railway goods traffic to exceed, the revenue from it to exceed passenger.
That's I mean, in of itself, that's something that is mind blowing for me because I always thought it was the other end. But there we go. So we're myth busting like that scene in Airplane. Dr. David Turner just smacking myths out of the way as we go through. That's good. I like that. Okay. Anyway, sorry, I digress. So yeah, tell us what we see here.
So again, these are very rough. I don't really have great conclusions from them, but you do see to some degree a downturn. Newcastle and Carlisle, not sure what's going on there. I'd be interested to actually throw into some railways connecting to larger conurbations, should we say London, the northwest, but what I tend to see, these were extracted from the Yorkshire Gazette, so
hence the locality of
the focus.
Yeah.
But that might suggest a decline in economic activity around Christmas week. So you've got the 30th of December is when you see the sort of dip.
Yeah.
So it suggests that people are perhaps doing less work. I will say that I think it was the North Midland, I might be wrong, but one of them gave dedicated figures for cattle. And you get this massive spike just before Christmas because people want their feasting meats.
Yes, I think it is the Newcastle and Carlisle actually. Yeah, sorry, I simplified the labels on these, but I think you're right. I think it was the.
Oh no! So it's a separate category that I have on the spreadsheet.
Okay. Right.
Maybe. And again, these are speculation. But the reason I got these is because I wanted to kind of situate it around that idea of like the Dickens quotes inventing Christmas tradition. And actually, so things are going on. And actually, since I've done this, I think that actually this might be a very useful and interesting way in to think about Christmas activity. Because if these figures are presented for year on year on year, who knows what can
absolutely, yeah. Particularly in terms of depending on the goods split. I mean, far better than me what split you generally get in sort of available data in terms of goods moved.
Which is quite hard. It's quite hard. Some of the railway companies did give passenger numbers. I mean, like some of these railways are only carrying like 3,000 passengers a week. Sorry, so these aren't huge amounts of traffic. But it depends on the railway. It depends where the minerals on one railway might outstrip the merchandise on another.
Yeah.
So it's I'm going to have to do this is not a project for now. I've got too many projects, but.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's
absolutely.
Yeah. Right, let's press on. So, we're going to hammer through this because otherwise we'll get stuck talking about railway stations.
But I will just add something quickly before.
Oh yeah, go on.
I should have put in a slide about this, but in I think it's the 1850s, maybe a bit earlier, I came across this account of the tent they put up, or the big temporary structure they put up next to Euston.
Oh wow.
To accommodate all the extra traffic. And they had a system whereby the trains would come in, there would be pigeonholes for where the different parts of London, and the stuff would be put in one side of the pigeonhole, and the carter would take it out the other, whether that be the railway's own carter or another carrier like Pickford's or, it might have been Pickford's. And I didn't get this from memory, but, I remember this much. But they take it out and deliver it. So they developed a system to accommodate the extra traffic at Christmas.
So really, this was that tent essentially there to protect the goods and the workers while
it was because extra space was needed to accommodate it.
So rather than it being out in the open, rather than it just being out in the open, they erected a temporary structure over the top of some sidings to. Fascinating, crikey! So there's clearly a ramp up. Yeah. But again, I suppose London has
exactly when that was.
Yeah, London has its concentration of middle classes. I suppose perhaps is that a lot of that goods. Were those goods things like
flows of goods towards the capital that would increase over this period.
Interesting. So. Food and things for people perhaps coming home for the. I suppose if you've got lots of people who are working out and about and then coming back, all sorts to explore.
We'll actually get to some of that sort of in the Edwardian period. So.
Nice. So let's go back to our map. Here is London, and here, if you remember from the from our a map that I've grabbed directly from our London termini episode. But here are all the London termini. We're not going to talk about all of these. We're just going to go through a few of them. But David, so I'm going to kind of just gently go through them. We'll go through fairly quickly. Yeah, tell us about each of these stations. So firstly, I've just got a question mark next to Marylebone, so there's not much to talk about from Marylebone.
What we're going to be seeing here are some statistics. Again, the railway companies or the newspapers publish the statistics, but the railway companies tended to supply the information. And in the days after Christmas, you might get articles saying between the 21st and 25th of December, X many passengers were booked in London from these terminals. So how many? And it speaks to the, should we say, late Victorian Edwardian interest in statistics that helps them make sense. I think helps them make sense of the world. And these are we're going to go around them, and we'll go around them pretty quickly. But the statistics are of varying, so they're given for varying lengths of periods. So the Great Central and the Great Western might be providing the newspapers with different. Well, the Great Central never presented.
I was going to say the Great Central hidden their numbers away, which is interesting. Yeah. I wonder why that might.
Okay, let's say the London North Western and the Great Central. Sorry,
So there's Euston and the London North Western.
So I don't know, but what I've done is I've taken the time range they're talking about how many days, and divided by the number they've given to give you a rough average of the daily total. But these figures are exceedingly rough because every company might give a different range. The GOR gave them beyond Christmas, so until 26th.
Which, as we see, will flatten the number slightly because there are more days. Actually, not all the days will be that peak. So actually, you'll be an artificially slightly lower number if the previous graphs are anything to go by, where you've got that peak. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So there's Euston, 16,483 a day.
16,000. We're going. As I say, these are all rough comparators. They are not accurate for the amount. They're not. They're an indicator. That's all. 16,400. So St Pancras, if you go, or which way are you going, Gareth?
We're going clockwise. So the next one is going to be St P. Sorry, I was just looking up some stats to compare with today's annual entries and exits, actually. Or daily, sorry.
I will add to this that this actually includes all the regular traffic as well. Now, they are printed because there is an uplift. There is an increase. There is an interest in that increase. But
so if I'm sorry, bear with me a second because I'm going to look. So annual entries and exits. Let's just do Euston for a starter. 6.6 million. So that's 6.6 times 1 million, and then divided by 365, just to give a rough idea of how much it is today. Is that really? Oh, well, there we go. So that is suggesting to me that we have daily about 18,000 or 20,000. For Euston, so I suppose it's the same.
They are lower than current figures.
Yeah, but only slightly. I'm impressed at how high they are compared to. So obviously, I've done that as a very rough and ready, quick.
So Euston had a lot of traffic going. We'll talk about the types of traffic, but a lot of long distance traffic, a lot of.
Oh, that's because it's COVID numbers. That'll be why.
Yeah, but there's a lot of long distance traffic. The London North Western. So these are 1902. The London North Western Railway are promoting many areas, as districts to visit. Whereas if we take into sort of St P, St P didn't really have a large commuter belt.
Yeah,
it had a small number of commuter trains, and it didn't really do much. It tended to do long distance stuff alone. So I don't really,
Yeah, and I suppose, it's interesting to explore, but I suppose we did not have as many, like a lot of long distance travellers in the UK now are, a lot of them are students. And we have a lot of younger people who live away from family in ways that, I don't know, and this is me guessing massively, but I'm going to guess that that's more now than historically. And people, Yeah, so I suppose that if it's relying on longer distance travel, then fewer people perhaps are traveling for Christmas. But
Yeah.
that's guesswork on my
And
part.
again, we'll talk about who's travelling in a second and where they're travelling. So King's Cross.
Yeah, so King's Cross, question mark again. So
they keep saying that you can track it and say one year they say it was very up on last year or it was very down. You're just going, how much?
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder if I get into the archive, I actually find the detailed statistics. Unlikely, but yeah.
So to give an idea, right, to come back, just to circle back to Euston, to give an idea of scale. So Euston has said, so their daily ridership, 16,483. The peak ridership we have in the modern era is 123,000 on average for the whole year. So that's not even the Christmas period. It'll be higher in the Christmas period. So that's more befitting, I think, of what I was expecting. That's why I was so surprised. So so this is it's almost an order of magnitude lower. In this, but what period is this, by the way, that we've got?
This is 1902.
This is 1902. Okay, so we're into the 20th century. So St Pancras 3,300, King's Cross. Who knows? Next, we're going to Liverpool Street.
Another large commuter.
Massive,
fair. Some services out to long distance quite a few long distance services. The Great Eastern was really interesting because, amongst other, they, I think they were one of the first, or maybe I'm overselling that, but they put on midnight services on Christmas for shop workers heading home.
Interesting.
Other companies did it. I don't know if they did it before or after, but the one I'm most aware of is Liverpool Street.
Yeah. That's very interesting. And then next is London Bridge, which is
so
Liverpool Street. I should say Liverpool Street for audio only people. 17,333 daily travellers. London Bridge 25,252.
Okay, so as we start coming south, so that's the London Brighton South. This is not the stations; these are the companies. So London Bridge, it's the London Brighton, Southeastern Chatham, railway.
Yeah.
25,252. That's the day average for the period that they provided me with.
Yep.
So that's quite a large amount. So if we go down towards Lou, we'll see a similar trend.
Yep, around 24,500.
Even it's around, it's because it's in 1903, and it's in an article I found that over 4 days they dispatched 100,000 people.
Yep.
Okay. We go down to Victoria.
23,300.
Now, remind me, Gareth, actually, is one of them's the London Brighton South Coast? I think it's the Victoria one.
Yeah, that's London Brighton South Coast. Is Victoria, yeah.
So, as you can see, 23,300, 24,500 and 25,252 for the south-facing station.
Yeah.
That, of course, is in part largely because they have a large commuter belt.
Yeah. Yeah.
But on top of that, it might suggest, I'm not sure it suggests too much extra traffic. And as we'll go into next statistics, I don't think it is a huge amount of extra traffic. But people are going south, into the suburbs for Christmas, perhaps. And I'll unpack that in a second when we get to the next graph.
Yeah.
Let's go around to poor Paddington.
Poor old Paddington. Quite
Great
a
Western
number of
Railway, 8,977. Again, not a huge suburban network.
No, very, very much not.
Long distance network. So the
interesting thing from this, and as you say, you'll break this down a bit in the next graph, but the the caveats to one side. Clearly there are caveats to the data as you've described, but the indication here is that the longer distance there are fewer longer distance travellers.
Yeah.
And at Christmas period, there's a much greater surge in the suburban travellers.
Well, I don't think that's the case. What I think is that generally the suburban railways are, on average, doing more daily business. This doesn't actually. The reason I present this again, this is what I don't have is a comparator with a regular week.
So you've got the numbers to compare, but not. But then you do for the next graph, which perhaps.
Yeah, I think what I'm trying to convey here is that in Christmas week, the busiest stations are to the south.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So then if we hop to your graph. which is very interesting. This is really interesting.
This is the contrast. So we had the bigger traffic at the south, but if you look at the figures on the far right, you see the southeastern and London Road South Coast. So this is their traffic over a regular week in 1911, so a bit later, about 9 years later. Yeah. And what that indicates is actually those figures for daily dispatches, the southern ones, they're not doing too much. The London South Western Railway is sort of in the middle. They're not doing too much extra business. So of that 24,000, only about, I'd say, 10 to 20% of that is actually extra traffic on top of what they usually do.
Interesting. So it's to the contrary of what I was describing. It's exactly as so. It's the opposite is the case. So,
but as you say, if you look at the other end of the table, you get the long distance providers.
So there's use.
So they're doing much more. They're doing much more. Long distance travel to different parts of the network. I mean, I will add the caveat again here is that this is for the entire company's network. So. Yeah. Whereas the figures I presented before were at the termini and London offices, this is for the entire network. So the pattern might repeat, but what we see here is that the London North Western Railway in a week before Christmas is doing 70% more traffic. The Great Northern is doing 60% more traffic. There is a major uplift across the network by the late Edwardian period, and it suggests that a huge upsurge in mobility around this period, more than the statistics I showed for the 1840s, by orders of magnitude in some places.
So I've just put I've just scribbled on here that broadly, not entirely, but broadly, you're looking at this split of below and above 40% of the long distance versus the suburban.
Yeah. I will add that these figures were actually printed in an advert magazine, the Railway magazine in 1912, in an article called "What the Railways Owe to Dickens."
Really? Okay, yeah.
So in the mindset of the Edwardian, the Christmas is
Dickens gave us Christmas.
Yeah,
that's interesting. So there we go. But that is fantastic. I really need to set up a template so that I don't. The toe of your room is covering up the letters E and K. It's just my bad slide setup, but it's fine. Everyone can read over a regular week. And I don't know how this is working in audio only, but yeah, I think we're describing what we can see. Right, crikey, 42 minutes already. Good grief. Oh,
okay. So
nice lounge music.
Yeah.
Where do people travel to?
So what other kind of the question I ask is firstly what kind of journeys, and so there's this. So if we move on. Oh.
Yeah. Go on. Yeah. I'm going to hide our faces while we put this up, and in fact, I can, if you like, I can read. Shall I read these quotes out for you?
Please do, Gary.
Here we go. Right, you always get me to do quote voice. It's always you who does quotes, and I have to then do quote voice. I haven't done one of these for a while. The old English custom of visiting the place of one's birth at Christmastide, of renewing acquaintance with one's home people, seems to be gradually giving way to the more modern practice of spending the vacation at some health resort. And that's from the Railway magazine in 1911.
Yeah, I mean, that's a general feeling that. So Neil Armstrong talks about this in his book, about this idea that there's a sort of anxiety. The death of the traditional Christmas. We talked earlier about the sort of focus on home, family, on intimacy, on childhood. And there's this fear that emerges in the Edwardian people that people are actually spending holiday away from the home. They are spending it on the Rivieras of France. The London Brighton South Coast, for example, advertises heavily, or the Rivieras, or they're spending it in hotels and resorts. And that's a picture from January 1914, is it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, January 14.
Sorry, just on my screen, it's just the bottom slightly carved, but so it's skiing holidays. Pastime is growing in popularity, I'd imagine. Yep. So there is that sort of anxiety that the death or the traditional Christmas is passing away, and if there's one thing that I've taken away from there's many things, but Armstrong's book is that there's always a fear that the traditional Christmas is given away to modernity, modern Christmas. This is also wrapped up with the sort of idea of, the consumer revolution, or revolution is perhaps a strong word, but the growth of consumption, consumerism in the late 19th century, gift giving, and displays in this is the period when there's displays in shops for Christmas, and the late 19th century. Advertising comes to feature, say, Father Christmas much more, comes to feature him as a figure of whatever. So there's a worry about the sort of how Christmas can be undermined by consumption and consumerism, and this is to an extent an extension of that, the consumer of a holiday, of so there's a worry there. But if we go on to the next one,
which I shall do. There we go. Right. Okay. I'm just quoting again. So
if you're happy to do the quote.
I'll do the quote voice. Here we go. G.H. Turner, no relation, I presume, the Midland Railway's general manager in 1896, is about to say this. If anyone from G.H. Turner's family is listening, I'm sorry. I have to do a slightly different one, don't I, as well? This adds additional complexity. The metropolis is constantly receiving an influx of population from the counties, and at Christmas time the return wave flows back for a day or two to the old homesteads, if they still exist, or friends in the country who have been left behind come up to visit their old chums who have settled themselves in the city. Christmas is still the period for family reunions. So, there we are. That's 1896. The Midland Railway's general manager.
Yeah.
Right, do I have to do the London Evening Standard quote as well?
Well, I'll do it for you.
Oh, yeah, go on then.
I won't put on a voice. So I'm lazy. More insistent even than during the great summer holiday periods is demand of the public for railway facilities at Christmas time, and the leading companies are kept increasingly busy each year in providing for the armies who go out to all parts of the country and return later to London after a brief visit to their homes. So what I'm trying to get across is that despite these anxieties, these worries that the Edwardian press might have had, or generally people still are travelling home for Christmas if they're using the railways. They're travelling to family, they're travelling to friends, they are trying to reassert the bonds of family and friendship and fellowship. And like many of the hypes around the decline of the traditional Christmas, it's probably overstated. I think it's overstated by a country mile. What we are seeing there is, in the previous, or what was talked about, is a lot of very wealthy people who are going, who are very visible, who are the ones who turn up to go long distances at Euston, or they are generally not the norm. They can afford to get away. Most people are travelling to see family, and even then, when people travelled, and again I'm going to sort of mention Armstrong's work here, when people travelled to hotels, they replicated the family.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So they went as a family anyway. It was just that they used some cash. A question I have, I don't know whether you have the information to pick this out, but it might be something else. The people who were doing ski holidays, and I am deliberately drawing commonality to, history doesn't repeat itself, as we've said together, but there are often parallels. Are the people who are travelling abroad, do they include from their ranks the sort of journalist class, the sort of the upper middle classes who are potentially sort of seeing their friends disappearing off on holidays because their fellow journalists are doing so? Is that, and does that therefore have a bit of I
don't know. I mean, I think it's the upper middle class. One of the factors that has influenced this is something called the servants' crisis. So this was a concern in the late 19th century about the quantity and quality of servants, which many upper class people had servants, but middle class people might have a servant as well. And one of the concerns is that you couldn't get there weren't in so available, but also people wanted time off at Christmas. It was more normal to have some time off at Christmas by the late 19th century. So it was easier for people to, sorry, this isn't answering your question, Gareth, but it was easier for people to go away to a hotel than trying to manage. There's this quote I've got about the wife managing the household.
Yeah, that's interesting.
With stress and problems, and and that is a factor there.
So it's interesting. Yeah, the only reason I asked is because it's often the case that we see, and we see it today, is that we see, the culture wars and all this stuff being magnified. And this is the culture wars is a fairly recent description of it. But actually, people have been moaning about Christmas being cancelled or whatever it is for years and years.
Yeah.
And it often comes from kind of. It often comes from the journalist class, and I was wondering if there are parallels there to.
Well, I think very much this is these fears and anxieties are articulated in magazines. I will look, and when we get to the adverts, I'll look at some of the reinforcing factors.
Yeah, sure. So,
but it's quite interesting. Like the whole Winterval, like a particular council replacing Christmas with Winterval. Well, no, Winterval was in addition to their regular Christmas. It was a publicity thing for business, It wasn't. Yeah. So there might be something in that, Gareth. Yeah. So as you say, the point is, it's these contrasting. That's kind of why I did them in black and white. These slides is because there's this contrasting reality of this, which is quite nice to sort of look at. Oh, so we have lounge music again. So let's.
The development of Christmas advertising, and it's not there are other things related that we're going to talk about, but this is kind of the meat of your sort of presentation that you delivered. It's worth saying, by the way, and you'll have time to do extra plugs later, but this is, you've given a more formal presentation on this basis that people can find, can't they? Was it for Portsmouth that you did it?
By at the time of recording today, I have not. It's not Portsmouth. It was the Institute of University of Portsmouth. Probably through one of my colleagues there. He promotes it via, he's social media. But it was with the Institute of Historical Research, Transport and Mobility History Seminar. At the point of recording, I've got to extract the video and actually send it off to YouTube. That probably won't happen now until after Christmas. So it might be available. It might not be available when this goes out, but
at some point it will be, and when it is, I'll put a link up. But yeah, that if there'll be more academic detail in there. But in terms of David and I continuing to natter on, we're now getting into some really interesting stuff. So in terms of years, what spread of years have we got here?
1901, 1902. So what I did for the paper is I looked at the high-end magazines, so the Bystander, the Sketch, the Illustrated, and I used the Gentlewoman, and one more. Oh no, it wasn't Sketch; it was the Sphere. There were 5 of them.
Yeah.
These are 1902, 93, 94. They're the early period in terms of my study.
Yeah.
And what I was going for here is look how plain the adverts are.
Yeah, hugely. They're very matter of fact. They just look like timetables, with a little bit of addition of.
They're information.
They look They don't look dissimilar to the ones from the 1870s and even the 1840s. It looks like not much has changed. I might be exceeding our remit here, but they look familiar to those ones we showed at the start.
I think what I'm going to illuminate here, what I'm interested in illuminated through Christmas, is how railway advertising changed over this period in tune with general developments in advertising. Railways arguably were a bit late comparative to other sectors of the economy, but what we see is greater focus on trying to learn what the consumer is after in the Edwardian period, trying to appeal to particular wants and desires, segmenting the market and different types of passengers much more rather than just announcing at them, trying to sell to those segments. We see developments in lithography and printing allow more interesting colours and more interesting stuff. Photography is used and more sophisticated, arguably. I'm not sure I like the word sophisticated selling, but what I'm interested in is also showing where there's continuity. So you can view railway advertising from like 1900 to 1939, which is my period. Of course, it was after, but as you could use the word gets more sophisticated. But actually, it's useful, also interesting to see the reasons for continuity and why. So there is very much less development between what we're looking at now in those early years of the 1900s, the first sort of 2, 3, 4 years. Actually, they do look very familiar to what was happening, decades before. There hasn't been a tremendous leap forwards. So this is a period where you get more creative selling and you get more creative guidebooks with more better photography, where the photography they're starting to think about what to use. Alex Metcalf, is his book on this is railway photographic advertising is really useful. Rocky Shin's work on this as well. But if we go on to the next slide,
it's
a bit older.
Things have appeared.
Things have appeared, but I don't actually think this is comparative to what's going on in other media. So the London North Western Railway, these are the end of the decade. London North Western Railway, for example, at this point is using cinema to promote themselves. Yeah. They're using Charles Urban as he was a documentary filmmaker, this is it's not too much of an advance. It's still very announcement driven.
So this period is kind of, are you saying this is kind of 1910?
This is 1910, 1911.
Okay, yeah, 19, so yeah. Okay.
So it's 10 years of development in railway advertising, but the announcements here are not much of a development. There's a bit of interesting, there's sort of the holly around the Great Western Railways, and there are examples which are a bit different, which we'll get to. There's the LSWR sort of in the path of the sun. Yeah. But it's not, it's a different kind of, they're promoting particular offerings more prominently, but it's still very much announcement driven.
Yeah, and it's not hugely sophisticated. They're playing with, they've got the word art out. For the Midland Railway, we've got word art out, which is good for them. But not hugely sophisticated still.
Not hugely sophisticated. I think there is more thought. But if we go on to, it's in the next one.
Yeah, the next one.
Yeah.
So this period is.
So why I put this up is this was to promote. This is the railway's focus, the main focus. We'll get to the GNR one in a minute. But the Cornish Riviera one, you see a bit more development. But these are fleeting things in a general, like the Midland one. The Midland one's stayed quite plain.
It is quite, it is.
What I'm trying to convey here is that the railway companies are in these magazines, should we say, magazines aimed at the upper middle class and the upper class, the elites. Actually, don't like the term upper class. Elites, that they are directed at selling the going away for the holiday.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting, the GWR one, which has a palm tree, by the way.
I know.
England's own winter resort. Why not go to Cornwall this winter and save the cost and discomfort and fatigue of going abroad? So they're juxtaposing it against.
It's quite clear what their market is. They're aiming at those people in the photograph from earlier with their skis.
Whereas the London, Brighton, South Coast can't really offer the same, but they're offering, Riviera Tour, New Haven and Dieppe. So they are offering, they're playing to their particular strengths. Again, I'll get to the GNR one in a minute, but again, it's a couple. It's a one of a pair. In 2 years. It was actually a poster as well. Luxury travel to anywhere in the north. So yeah.
And the Great Easterns is much more simple, admittedly.
Clacton, and Southcliffe, Felixstowe, the South End.
Yeah.
So
this period, these are what era are we looking at here? These sort of late 1910s.
These are a mix, but they're generally from about 1905 through to about. I would say about, they're after 1905. Let's just say that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, these are all pre-23, so.
So nothing I'm showing is before 1914.
So they're all. So yeah, they are. So they're 1905 to. So this is sticking within your ear. 1905 to 1914. So there's a bit of a spread there.
Yeah. So if we hop on to the next one. So what I'm trying to show with these ones is that the railway companies did try and play with the people going home, or they tried to express home for Christmas. So the London South Western Railway have Home for Christmas as their title between 1902, roughly, maybe 1903, and 1912. And we'll get to that in a minute, why that changes. The Great Central, who's general manager, London South West, was an ex-London South Western Railway employee, but I'm not saying anything. Maybe a factor, can't say anything, was way home for Christmas. And the reason I put the Great Western Railway one, again, a slightly different, Great Western Railway being a bit more adventurous there with its design. It's got the sunshine, it's got the steam engine, it's got the holly. It actually says whether you're going, I think it's whether you're going on holiday or to visit friends and family. These appeals to sort of family, to going home for Christmas, to intimacy, to very much that sort of more traditional Victorian idea. I've got 4 there, and 2 by one company. Whereas if I looked for the other ones, for obvious reasons, the railway companies want to sell to their long distance market because it's probably more lucrative.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you've got 3 different. It's not as common, but they are clearly trying to appeal to that idea of. I just noticed something that the LSWR's one is the pleasant route.
Yeah, I know. It says the pleasant route here, which
it's got home for Christmas in the for the podcast. Home for Christmas in his Xmas.
Yeah.
In the circle. Notice how he went from Christmas to Xmas.
Yeah. Xmas popping up all over the place at this point.
Little arrow downwards. It's not the pleasant route. So clearly, it's just like for some. It must be like
And also, they've got in the path of the sun, which is clearly the LSWR's LNSWR, thing is that they say they're in the path of the sun. It says in the path of the sun for health and pleasure.
Yeah.
And again, the GWR, the great bastion of all things good and British and rose-tinted spectacles, is also saying Xmas here.
Yeah.
They are in a rather glorious-looking Ford font.
But what's really interesting around the roundel, they've got trains, scenery, sunshine, health. Fine trades.
Fine trades, yeah.
So it's actually looking at the different segments. So people who are looking for health, health visits, looking for sunshine, looking for scenery, going back to sort of a idea of the Great Western Railway is very much trying to sell this idea that it will take you back if you're a city dweller to a rural time past, a rural idyll.
Yeah, absolutely.
Later on, they actually scratch out the telegraph poles on photographs to make it look less modern.
Interesting.
They take pictures that have no car. Lots of their work is very clearly have no cars in them, to try and make an appeal to. Again, this is Alex Metcalf. He's done some great work on this. Appeal to those people looking for a sort of, I'm going to go back to a simpler, more
salubrious air, not the traffic. Traffic being an issue pretty rapidly into the 1900s. But like interwar years, traffic was already a But even before that, actually, even in the run up to the First World War, traffic was starting to. The cities had huge amounts of horse traffic as well as early motor traffic. I just want to read what's in the brackets for the GWR advert, 'cause it's quite nice. Whether you want a real holiday at Xmas, and then open brackets, i.e. a thorough change that will brace up the health for the coming arduous months.
Just like...
Well, it's still that attitude that you like need to have good air and like, have the heat before the difficult cold months. Go and have the heat through your body type thing, which is
get refreshed inside.
Yeah. Send a postcard now. There we go, GWR.
Yeah, if we go on to the next one, I just want to. So this is okay. So this is one of the things I think railway advertising literature, the historic stuff, is when you look at posters, it's easy. What a lot of work has done, very good work, is try to deconstruct the messages. We do not have, in many cases, or at all, much of the documentation that underpinned many of the posters. It's not survived into the archives. So what people have done is try to look at the content of archives. Of posters and things, to try and deconstruct the messages immediately, content analysis. Whereas I think content analysis is actually part of the story. It's part of for example, me studying these magazines helps me understand how a certain kind of user was sold to and what their interests were.
Yeah.
So, excuse me. But also I'm interested in strategy and advertising strategy around the content. So on the left, we've got the London North Western Railways one, and it's really interesting. It's the last one I found, and it's from 1909.
Okay.
1909, you see, it's December 1909. 1909, the company gets a new general manager, Frank Rhee, and he reconstitutes the advertising department under Alec de Ferron, who, by the way, was also the son of the Metropolitan's advertising manager.
Interesting.
I don't know how that worked.
Yeah.
But clearly they had a decision to stop advertising these particular magazines. I don't know why, but if we keep in mind the graph that was back earlier, the London North Western Railway had the most massive uplift in traffic in Christmas week. Maybe they just thought that, we don't need any more traffic.
Yeah.
However, I don't think that's particularly true, because they keep advertising in other places. They keep advertising North Wales as a winter resort.
Okay.
So I don't know what's going on there. Interesting.
Another one for further exploration in the future by you or others.
Well, I did a whole paper on the selling operation of London North Western Railway. I don't think I'll find the answer to that one, but we'll see. So the middle two are 1906 and 1907. They are the Great Northern Railways. One of them was a poster. Oh, they might be Gareth, you're writing on the screen, and it might be 7 and 8, but they are of that era. These two are quite unique in that I have not found anything like them. So you've got some of the more design-orientated adverts from the Great Western, but these are the only ones where you actually get something that became a poster, like a proper thing you can deconstruct. And clearly it's a couple, they're going away, they could be going on holiday. You could read it differently. It's really interesting. You could read it as a couple going away.
It appears to be the same couple as well, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Certainly the woman appears to be the same woman.
Different, the different clothes for the gentleman. But, oh no, is he wearing an overcoat?
He's wearing an overcoat. I think possibly he is. They might be wearing different clothes, but certainly the faces, the lady's face is the same. It's not quite as obvious, although I think the man is supposedly the same as well.
So there's a mountain in the background.
Yes.
What's really interesting is in other ones, GNR advertised skiing holidays in Norway later on because they completely abandoned this approach.
Oh, really?
They go to the more text-based ones. And the mountain could be a Norwegian mountain. I mean, you're getting off a GNR train, so it's probably not. But it could indicate sort of a symbolism of where you could be taken. Could be a Scottish mountain as well. So it's kind of, you could read it, but you could read it as someone going home for the holidays, going, so it could be read depending on what your view is.
It could be someone going from Leeds to London, then on to Europe type thing. Yeah. Clearly being ambiguous to allow to. Yeah,
the term is polysemy. It's a word like that. It means something you can read in multiple ways.
Yeah.
But this coincides with the arrival of Henry Jewell, who was the advertising manager of the Great Northern Railway. Clearly, he talks in 1914 to Advertising World magazine about how he's come to think that large adverts in periodicals and publications, newspapers, I think that's what he said, don't work. So I suspect, can't be sure, that he tries these for a couple of years and then he realizes it's actually not what people want. It's not making the effect in these magazines.
And you'd hope that they were doing that on the basis of not seeing any particular increase in revenue associated with it.
Yeah, but it's the question about how they worked out they weren't working. It's the question of how would they know that somebody looked at this and thought, I'm not really up for that.
It's interesting you say that, actually. A very brief interlude, given that we've run, oh crikey, 1 hour and 8. Very brief interlude is that having just listened to Trash Future podcast again, shout out again. They're talking about the fact that modern internet advertising, the click through rate on adverts on our web pages is pathetic. It's 20%. And advertisers, despite everything on the internet being about collecting data about who's being advertised to, adverts are of dubiously obvious effectiveness and limited access to data to prove their effectiveness.
There was a Free Economics podcast about actually they in the States they stopped advertising with one company in one county and then they kept it up in another one and they see no discernible change in advertising. It's not perfect experiment, but there is some evidence to suggest that advertising is completely pointless. But never mind. I'm over dramatising. I'm not an
But
expert
certainly, yeah.
on
But it's
advertising.
interesting. But it plays into that the data. The access to the data to prove the effectiveness of a campaign is quite interesting. I also just want to draw attention to speed and comfort. There we are. The GNR.
It was their tagline. But the thing I would say that Jules said they kept everything and they analysed its impact. So how he did that, I don't know. I don't know how he could do that. I mean, the other consideration, if every company is advancing their advertising techniques, does that actually mean that there's an overall increase in traffic, or does it mean that everybody's increase neutralizes everybody?
Yeah.
Sophistication. Sorry, I meant the sophistication.
Yeah.
So I'll move on to because I'm conscious time is pressing, but
sure.
The last one is the London South Western Railway. So we've still got In the Path of the Sun.
Yeah, it's still there. This little stamp.
We still have, but Home for Christmas is gone.
Yes.
Okay. So what's really interesting is H.A. Walker, Herbert Walker, latterly Southern Railway General Manager, took over, and he again reconstitutes it. It seems to be all correlated with the arrival of the new advertising manager under F.V. Milton, and F.V. Milton went on to, he's got a new department. Previously, the London South Western Railway had 3 districts, operating districts, each with their own advertising centre, department, office. He consolidates it under Milton, and this comes out. 1910, the London South Western Railway and the Great Western Railway had signed a agreement whereby they agreed to pull traffic, eliminate the degree of competition. The Great Western Railway are also extending their, enhancing their offering, the Cornish Riviera. The Cornish Riviera is such a brand name that it gets mentioned in Parliament by an MP who says, well, it's something along the lines of, if people are going to be convinced by this, yeah. But what you interestingly see here is that competitive context, the strong offering from the Great Western Railway in terms of, people recognise, the Cornish Riviera, and the fact that there's an agreement. What will work for the South Western is promoting Bournemouth.
Okay. So
Bournemouth, they have much more of a monopoly on it. Bournemouth is their place. So they promoted their offering because they could extract more of the revenue. So you see there how the competitive context shapes the output here.
Yeah.
So I think that's an interesting how. So we get 3 examples of different strategy. On the first, we get a withdrawal from a market or advertising in a market for reasons unknown.
Yeah.
The digital 2 exemplify how this is a period of formative development for advertising in railways, and this is experimentation. The third one is about how the competitive context will shape advertising. And so you're not focused solely on the content, the broader strategy is important.
Yeah,
so
and that context allows you to then read additional stuff as a historian. You can read.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. So, if we jump on to these next 2 here.
So I just wanted to highlight that that these things are usually interlinked with the holiday program. I get these from magazines and these covers, but I've never actually encountered one of the programs they were interlinked with. So you could see an advert and say, go to your local station, send off for this. I would love to see one. Yeah. But they had Christmas festive. These are 2 that I know about. And that one's, I think, from the Great Eastern, or was in a magazine. The Great Eastern Railway Society, if you want it, have digitally scanned, like the Railway and Travel Monthly, the Great Eastern Railway magazine, LNER magazine. You can buy them on their website. It's fantastic. That's where I think I got that. I'm not sure where I got the left image. Very fun image there on the front, relaxation, but notice it is from London and suburban stations. I don't know why that's particularly relevant, but it's clearly saying go away for fun at Christmas.
Yeah. Again, it's interesting to pick that out. There we go. Yeah. So
that's all I really wanted to say. But just to contextualize, these weren't the adverts were not independent of a broader scheme of a campaign.
Yeah.
They were part of some other things. They were integrated with other media.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then the next one, we enter into the world of colour.
So yeah, these are posters. These are all
okay,
posters. Again, you've got Father Christmas, who's very coming through as a. Now I don't know when the LNER happens. LNWR1 is from maybe after the war or before it, but I just liked it.
Yeah.
Father Christmas is clearly a big figure. Father Christmas comes through as an icon, as we know him, very much varied. He's got a different hat in the one on the left.
Yeah, this one is
earlier period, but it's quite clear that Father Christmas is a big thing. And then we got the children. Yeah. And I remember what I was talking about, the focus on it being a childhood festival. This is very much reinforcing that idea that traditions get legitimacy, or traditions tend to have sort of repetition of traditions imbues them with a sort of moral position, for some people. And this is perhaps we can't know, saying, well, this is a childhood festival, here's Father Christmas, go away, excursion arrangements, and you can retain maybe your holiday, your traditional Christmas holiday by the GNR.
Yeah, and it's very much. I mean, it's also as you say, that word you're using earlier. The children implies family, and it's like, if you don't deny your children their Christmas, and all this sort of sort of implied conversation that comes with that. It's. But
also, on the right, Father Christmas has clearly done his job, and he's headed home. Busy people relax.
Yeah,
I love it.
He's done his job. He's sat. He's got. I suppose it's supposed to be red wine, but it looks like a big bottle of ketchup. And he's got a chicken dinner in front of him. And there's a colossal pudding on its way towards him. He's sorted.
There's a Great Western poster that has a massive pudding.
Puddings are clearly the bigger your pudding, the better your first class offering. And in the middle here, so we've got those two. In the middle, we've got the
Brighton,
the Brighton.
So the reason I introduced that one is for all the developments that we've seen in the advertising, the one company that doesn't actually change its advertising until the very end, from the very 19th century, is the Brighton line, the London Brighton South Coast. And if you were to read the press at the time, and if you were to read some commentators, scholars, they'd say that the railways were unsophisticated in this period. And the Brighton could be argued is unsophisticated, in quotes. And I'm not, as I say, maybe I said it, but I'm not overly happy with the word sophisticated, because it's almost like feels predetermined about the outcome.
Yeah.
But this advert is lauded in about 1904, 1905 for being creative and inventive.
Huh.
The advertising manager is advertising. Forgive me, I forget his name, but he's interviewed and he says, "No, we're a modern company. He says, what does he say? He doesn't say we're a modern company, but he talks in a way that shows that he recognises the sophistication." I don't know whether he's the advertising manager that authorised this and whether there was a new one. That's a bit later. But what it suggests to me is that while the London Brighton South Coast might not have changed their advertising in those high-end magazines, they were creative in other directions, which shows me that they are I think they weren't doing it by accident.
And it's got the greens and the reds that we associate with holly, with Christmas. It's got these sort of mistletoe branches acting as the map. It's quite a clever little poster. This one, it's good. And it says at the bottom, it says "Spend Christmas in the sunny south." So it's still bringing in this idea that it's still inheriting and carrying forward that idea that go on holiday for Christmas. Go and explore somewhere salubrious.
Yeah.
That's interesting, yeah.
Okay,
so
we move on to our...
no. Oh, okay, so here we go. So we've got two quotes, which I'll get my quote voice out. So this first one, is this someone's whose surname is Grinding?
I put this in the wrong place, I think.
Okay. Oh, is this from
earlier? No. So this is busy people at the station.
Okay, sure. So
so it's just saying that it's busy and,
So this is someone referring to the Christmas. Okay.
So there's a fear at this time that the Christmas, because of the busyness at termini even, they cannot get served in shops. They're overcrowded trains, and another worry about the modern Christmas in the Edwardian period, or what was then modern, was the decline of the festive spirit.
Okay, because everything's a bit chaotic and a bit Black Friday.
But if you go on to the next one, I'm sure.
Okay, so I'll read these quotes out first, though. So I'll say. So the first is a quote from Our Railways at Christmas by. Is that a person grinding?
It's grinding.
Grinding.
Yeah.
Sorry, grinding.
Oh, I think it should be grindling. I don't know.
All right, well, Google it. Not us. Our people in the chat, get on it. Less suggestive of the spirit of Christmas present, which is a Dickens reference straight off the bat. And then Anonymous is describing. Who cannot get served in shops which are full of customers, cannot get seats in overcrowded trains, cannot get about in cabs that are held up by the traffic, cannot get away from the waits and midnight carols. Yeah. I don't know why I've given them a slightly Cockney accent, but anyway, that's from Anonymous and Christmas Hampers in 1906 there.
Yeah.
It's that sense of what is, frankly, a familiar sort of complaint of the idea that everything's all, busy and over commercialized and busy and, yeah.
Okay, so if we go on to the next one.
Yes. And here we go.
So the crowd, we can. I'm not going to delve deeply into this. These are agency sellers of tickets. So the railway companies pick up on. I mean, firstly, this fear. Most people agreed that the festive spirit was in decline. Again, it's a sort of sensationalism. But what I like about this is excursion trains and tickets were sold in advance. By the companies, but also by agents. So the railway companies recognise that people want to avoid this crush at stations.
In fact, literally, these avoiding crush at railway stations in this advert here. Yeah.
Yeah, avoid the crush. So it's used as a selling point to get people in. The other thing I'd say is that railway companies are thinking about, 1896. Not many excursions run at Christmas, but by 1910, you got an advert from the Great Northern Railway. A lot of excursions are run, or a growing number of excursion tickets are sold around Christmas. Not a huge proportion, but I think, special trips, what that entailed and how what was underneath the term excursion, I'm not entirely sure yet. But it does show that the railway companies are thinking a bit more about their users and the service provision that they want to provide.
It's interesting, and they're talking about Xmas excursions to Paris, Nice, Brussels, etc.
Yeah,
to tours and cruises to all parts at home and abroad.
Yeah. They're resellers because it's. Where are you looking?
The middle one. Yeah. So and it's saying this is clearly a reseller because it's quoting several railway companies.
Yeah. So the survey's the one on the left now.
Yeah. So there we go. So nice. So if we all right. So
we'll have to breeze through this, but
yes, very quickly. Christmas greenery. So we've got.
I wanted to talk about supply chains because I know people love supply chains. So we're going to quickly say that Christmas trees.
Yeah.
Where did your Edwardian Christmas tree come from? Christmas trees generally. So it was great, really interesting. So generally, the saplings would be grown in Scotland.
Ah, interesting. Okay.
Or the British market, and be shipped around the country to different growing sites. A major growing site was around Woking in Hampshire. This is why the London South Western Railway wagons there with Christmas trees. They would be shipped from, they'd be grown to take 4 years to grow, and they needed to get them at a perfect point where they wouldn't grow too much that they sort of crowded out their neighbours. Then they would be shipped to Nine Elms, and on the right we see Christmas trees from Surrey before the auction at Nine Elms. So they would be auctioned off to merchants who worked in, should we say, Covent Garden Market and other markets around London, who would then sell them to punters.
Yeah. And this first image is in Germany. Is that they're actually coming from Germany? So we did source them even further afield, which is interesting.
Yeah. So about 1/4 of all Christmas trees found in homes in Britain just before the First World War would come from Germany, I think Norway and Belgium.
Ah, interesting.
I mean, this is a period where an awful lot is imported. Britain is the major importer in the world, no tariffs on almost all goods. If we go into the next one, so you got a van load of greenery from 9 Elms. You see some wagons in the back, but like mistletoe from Normandy.
Yeah. So you can see the scale. Yeah, all sorts arriving. And
it's coming in. But it just goes to show that, I mean, this is not the only thing that would come in. You would have got goods that came in from all over the world for Christmas. And that's something I want to actually unpack a bit more. The supply chain Christmas. Because it's great to talk about people. And, I'm fascinated. That's not, and where they moved. But they needed to be supplied.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things is that, we don't know how, if we take what was on the Christmas plate in 1910, where did all those goods come from? Where did all the presents come from?
It's exactly as you were saying earlier. It's just fascinating to attempt to unpick some of that. And I suppose there will be data. You've already picked out some data, looked at cattle, so it is interesting to unpick some of that. Yeah.
So the thing I'd say about this is that the Edwardian press was fascinated by where things came from. Perhaps because you get, similar today, a separation between the points of consumption and production. And you do get that sort of, it's almost like that program in the factory.
Yeah.
Where they go in and find out how the thing is produced. The Edwardians had those as well. So you can get a sense, but which just not been deconstructed. We've got a lot of research on milk. We've got it's all interesting, fascinating, on cattle. But in terms of the more varied array of supply chains, and we just don't know. So I'm keen to look at that. But that's
turkeys, geese. This is what we want to understand. This is
a lot of turkeys from East Anglia, I'd suggest.
Yes. So reflections on the contemporary railway of this. Well, firstly, I'm putting up some slides from the last Christmas specials. I kind of chucked this in because I've very, very, very briefly, sort of the things that I was thinking about, kind of particularly, and even more now I've thought of this discussion, is the parallels, not history repeating itself, but some of the parallels of, the surge in travel at Christmas and the extent to which we still do engineering work at Christmas and the efficacy or otherwise of that. But also some of this stuff about the decline of this idea that Christmas is somehow in decline from a variety of metrics that clearly was being felt over 100 years ago as well.
Again, Neil Armstrong's book says it was being felt in the 17th and 18th century.
Oh, really? Okay, so
a different kind of Christmas, country homes, and but that feeling is not.
And so people can, if we want to explore that a little bit, you can go back to last year's, because this is the last of this year's Christmas specials. This is the second season of Christmas specials I've done. But last year's Christmas specials were we had Bonnie Price talking about what the railways do at Christmas. We had Alex joining us and talking about railways versus snow, which is basically an excuse to talk about snow plows, which is fine. And then actually we had Justin Rosniak talking about railroads, which is basically about as Christmassy as me wearing a Christmas hat, and that was about it. But those were the Christmas specials last year. So, David, you'll be very pleased to know we're gonna draw things to a. Go on.
I will make one thing. I will just say one thing before we go. I was bumbling through things. I found a scheme that the railways ran in the 1930s, and I thought it's just a really great idea, and I thought I'd share it. You could go in 1936. They launched a scheme, a gift ticket scheme, to encourage rail travel at the festive period, and you could go to a station and have a ticket sent to your friend or family, an outward ticket, and it came in a Christmas card.
That's lovely.
And I just kept thinking, that wouldn't be too bad today.
That wouldn't be bad, would it?
You could order a ticket for your friend to come and visit. Now, you can do it directly, but with the Christmas card, that might be just nice.
That's
nice.
Well, there they are. David Horn, if you're listening.
Yeah.
That's what we need. LNER Christmas cards with a little outward ticket. And then obviously your mate has to pay for the return.
Yeah.
Come on, we're not. But that's lovely. I like that a lot. Right, we'll come back to David momentarily. But of course, thanks to all the audio-only listeners. Pleasure to have you along. This is available in podcast form on all good podcasting platforms, and I think it is working fine now again. The usual ads, patreon.com/Gareth Dennis for the Patreon people. Thanks to all of you. You'll be getting some special content this Christmas, though you may have already had it from me. The merchandise from Masquette. I was drinking out the mug. The mask is behind me. You know the deal. Masquette.uk/collection/railnatter. Just search Railnatter merchandise. I think it comes up. If you want to chuck pennies at me, you can via paypal.me/Gareth Dennis, and the Discord server where all the chat. Hello, everyone in the chat. More of that happens at GarethDennis.co.uk/Discord. Oh, what's next? The next episode 96, the second episode of 2022. Good grief! How many of the? So many. We're nearly at episode 100. It's quite something. What's wrong with the Ronva line? With Rebecca Wilkes is joining us from the National, actually, which will be very interesting. I'm looking forward to that. Rebecca's going to join us, talk about the Ronva line, and we'll see if we can understand why the Ronva line is a bit of a problem and whether it's going to be fixed in the future. So that should be very interesting. Oh, we can come back to our big Mugginses and say a very big warm thank you to Dr. David Turner for joining us.
No
David,
problem.
thank you so much. Yeah, that was lovely, and we shall have to. Well, who knows? Keep us up to date with your latest explorations, and
Okay.
and we shall. It only really remains for David and I to bid you all a happy New Year and a cheerio. So cheerio,
Happy New Year,
everyone.
everybody.
Cheerio.